Hello and welcome to PsychBoost. In this video I'll be giving another explanation for attachment. I'll be talking through Bowlby's monotropic theory. Bowlby is very influential in attachment theory and he uses terms like critical period, internal working model, social releases and some other key terms that we'll use in other areas of the attachment course. And of course there'll be ways that we can evaluate Bowlby's work. So the first thing to mention about Bowlby's monotropic theory is fundamentally it's an evolutionary explanation. It comes from the concept that babies, from an evolutionary point of view, have an innate attachment drive. And they have this innate attachment drive because they want to live, they want to survive. If they're secure, then they tend to survive. To stay secure, babies are evolutionarily primed to stay close to one caregiver. And this in the vast majority of situations, according to Bowlby, is mum. Now Bowlby's theory is based in part on Lorenz's work on imprinting geese, and also Harlow's contact comfort theories. So an unusual term that you might not have heard before is called monotrophy. Infants have a very unique, very strong attachment to a single caregiver. And Bowlby is very much of the opinion that this single caregiver really does have to be mum. Something taken from Lorenz's work is the idea of a critical or a sensitive period. In order for this strong attachment to take place, Bowlby is saying the attachment has to happen in the first 2 to 3 years after birth. If this attachment doesn't happen within this period, Bowlby argues that there's long-term negative consequences of not forming the attachment in this critical period. Part of this is because the infant is unable to develop an internal working model. Bowlby is suggesting that the first strong attachment that a child has with its mother acts as kind of a blueprint. This blueprint informs us of how to respond in future relationships. So how much a child trusted its mum might influence how it trusts future relationships. If it felt loved by mum, it might feel that in future relationships it is fundamentally lovable. And you can see here the influence of Freud in Bowlby's concept of the relationship with the mother being fundamentally important in later relationships. And we can also see Harlow's work in this. Harlow followed up his monkeys that had been maternally deprived, and so there were very negative social consequences. A main factor that Bowlby suggests influences the strength of relationships is the consistency of the care. Frequent separations between the infant and mother will result in a weaker overall attachment. Also, according to Bowlby's monotropic theory, a healthy attachment style shows that mum is used as a safe base. Babies will happily explore their environment, but if mum disappears or a stranger approaches, then babies will show distress and rush back to mum. And another concept used by Bowlby's monotropic theory is the concept of social releases. Babies instinctively use signals to contact their parents. They cry, they smile, they use vocalizations like gurgles and noises. These are designed to attract the caregiver's attention, and it's fairly clear that they're instinctive. What may be less clear is adults are biologically programmed to find these behaviours cute or especially distressing. Either way, this is more likely to activate the caregiver's attachment emotions. And we can see here the influence of evolution, both on the baby but also on the adults. So those are the key concepts of Bowlby's monotropic theory. Let's look at some evaluations we can use. So first up, Bowlby's work is based partly on work by Lorenz. Now these imprinting studies do demonstrate the strength of what a strong attachment to a single caregiver can give. Geese in the wild simply wouldn't survive unless they had this imprinting mechanism. And you can see how it would be useful as well to have a similar system in humans. But we do have to be careful. Just because we've clearly observed something in an animal doesn't mean it can be generalised to humans. We are of course very different from geese for a lot of reasons. A strong criticism we might have of Bowlby is that his theory suffers from beta bias, which is a type of gender bias. We could suggest he's over-exaggerated the difference between the role of the mother and the role of the father. He's basically suggesting that the role of the father just isn't important. The father's role is pretty much limited for Bowlby into just providing resources for the family. Now this idea certainly lacks temporal validity. It might have been somewhat true in Bowlby's time, but really in modern society men are expected to take an equal part in the caring behaviour for their children. And if we take Bowlby's theory at face value, that mothers are the ones who should be providing the care, what does this mean for working mothers? who leave the care and responsibilities to the fathers. Just as our evaluation for learning theorists there's a very convincing argument from Bowlbys Monotropic theory, we can do the reverse. So one negative evaluation of Bowlby is there are alternate explanations to attachment. If you're a behaviourist, you suggest that it's the environment, not biology, that creates attachment, and that attachment is based on patterns of reinforcement and the association between mother and the food that she gives. And learning theory as a whole is well supported by a large number of well-controlled experiments. Another interesting talking point is the concept of the continuity hypothesis, which we'll come back to in a later video. This is based on Bowlby's concept of the internal working model, and it suggests that the types of relationships we have later on is due to the development of this internal working model when we're infants. Now, concern with this is it's very highly deterministic. Adults like to think they have full conscious control in who they get into a relationship with and what happens in those relationships. And that includes taking responsibility for when it goes right, but also when it goes wrong. Not that the success of their relationships is set in some way in their own infancy. I really hope you found this video useful in studying psychology. 3 things help this channel grow a lot: likes, comments and subscriptions. Thank you so much if you've done any of those things for this video.